Do you know the exact number of leads, in other words, potential new clients, you need calling your law firm, say each week or each month, in order to generate $1 million? If you don't understand that and you want to know the answer, then tune in and find out how.
You are listening to the Prosper Law Podcast. Learn how to reduce stress, have more time, and make more money. Come on in.
I'm Greg McCollum, and I built a 7-figure criminal defense law firm. I formed Prosper Law to show criminal defense law firm owners who are desperate for success how to grow from under $200,000 to $1 million and beyond. In order to have $1 million law firm, and some law firms are less than $1 million, obviously, and then there are several criminal defense lawyers in the United States that I'm aware of, some of I know personally, who are well over $1 million. Some people are easily making $2-3 million in criminal defense, which is interesting because, years ago, I didn't think that was even possible, but a lot is possible, and people are proving it and doing it. And there's a lot of innovative criminal defense lawyers who are growing their law firms into real businesses that support them and give them the life that they really deserve. And it also helps their employees and helps their clients, because the clients get better service when the law firm is running really well and making a profit, and people are happy and relaxed and energetic. It makes a huge difference. And if you've been a criminal defense lawyer in the trenches, like I have, and really all the criminal defense lawyers I've ever known and I currently know, those trenches are tough. It's a rough place to live sometimes. Now, in terms of how many, just a simple question, how many leads do you need in order to have $1 million law firm? And it's just math. It's not that complicated. And I can run through it here with you right now. It's like, how many people do you need to call you to get $1 million a year in revenue? And I'm going to go back, after I do this, I'm going to backtrack and talk about average case value, because in this example, and you should know this, if you have a law firm and you want to grow, or you have a business you want to grow, you should know that $1 million, okay, divided by 12 months it's 83,333, okay? That's how much you have to get. So this math goes a little bit above it. So in order to get, say, $84,000, $85,000 a month in, and your average case value is $5,000, and I just picked that out of the air. There's a basis for it, and I'll go back and explain some of that. But $5,000 average case value means you've got to have 17 retained clients. In other words, each month, 17 clients have to hire your law firm and pay you to represent them. And so then if you're going to retain 17, okay, let's say you have a conversion rate of 100%, which I would say no one has. But if you have a conversion rate of 100%, then that means 17 people contacted you, 17 people paid the entire fee, and now voila, you've got $1 million law firm. Now, realistically, though, your conversion rates are not going to be 100%. They may be well below 50%. So I'm going to take a conversion rate of a third, 33.33%, okay? 33%. So now you got to take that 17 retained clients, and you're going to convert a third of them, so you have to have 3 times as many. So 17 times 3 means you have to have 15 potential new clients call you each month. So that's it. Your conversion rate is a third. Your average case value is $5,000. You need 17 retained clients for $1 million. So you got to have 51 people who are qualified leads contact you. And that's it. That's all you need to know. It's that simple. Now, where do you get hung up on this? When I first started learning and learning from mentors and people explain this to me, what would happen then is I would see the formula, and I go, okay, perfect. But then when I would go back to my law firm, when I'd leave my event, when I'd leave my training, or when I'd get off the phone with whoever was teaching me, and I go back to my law firm and I'm looking at it. So now I'm back in chaos. I'm back in lack of clarity. And the reason is that I don't know what those key numbers are. In order for the math to work, I have to know a couple of things, and I don't know it at that time. And when I talk to other lawyers, it's depending on where they are. A lot of them don't know it. If I ask you, if you're listening to this and you have a criminal defense law firm, and I ask you, how many leads did you get last month? And of those leads, how many of those leads were qualified? And I'll talk about qualified and what that means. And then if I ask you, what's your average case value? Okay. And then I ask you, what's your conversion rate? If you don't know those numbers, then you can't do the formula because you're just in the dark. You don't know how to do it because you don't have those numbers. And this would happen to me back in, this is like say 2015, 2014. So I'm sitting in a room, the light bulb is going off, and I think, okay, wow, that's not that complicated. This is very mechanical. So I need to just go back to my office and do this. Well, that's where the problem set in, because I wasn't tracking the numbers. And if you're not tracking these numbers, then you're just in the dark. And so you can't move forward because you don't know what's going on. So let's talk about for a minute, just average case value. And this is just, this is not a perfect formula. In other words, your average case value is going to be skewed a little bit if you do it like this, but this is a simple way to do it. And it's something that it's pretty easy. So you look at how much money did you make? So let's say you just look at last year, because you filed a tax return, what your gross revenue is. So you look at how much money did I take in? And then after that, you look at how many clients did we sign up? How many people retained us during that calendar year? Now, the imperfections are that maybe somebody was on a payment plan, maybe somebody owed you some money, maybe there's some bleed over from the previous year, but that's okay. So you look at how many people did we get, and you take your gross revenue and divide it by the number of clients that you signed. There's your average case value. The first time I did this, I was really shocked at how low it was, because we were charging, I don't know, at that time $3,000 or $4,000 for a DUI. Sometimes somebody'd pay me $10,000 or $15,000. We did some speeding tickets back then. We charged $350 or something like that. And we had other misdemeanor cases that we were charging $1,500 or something. So when I looked at my average case value, it was shockingly low by doing this. It was something like, I can't remember. I remember I was stunned. And I think some of that was because I had accounts receivables where people were supposed to pay, the next part of the fee, and that's just never happened. But it was like about $1,800 or something like that, and I couldn't believe it. So afterwards, we got the average case value up, I think, to about $6,500. Now that's still low in my mind, because if we're charging people, $3,000 for a summary court, municipal court misdemeanor, and a lot of people, maybe they've raised their fees up to that, but we were charging $3,000 for every one of those cases. So it's like somebody gets an open container or some ticket. Most lawyers aren't charging that much. We charge, for an arrest emergency, just to go surrender you and turn you in, say $2,500 just on a basic case, not a homicide or anything like that. And then we charge for, say, something like a robbery or a felony assault, $30,000, criminal sexual conduct kind of cases, 50,000, maybe more, 75,000. So even though we're charging those pretty big fees and getting a significant number of those cases, still the average case value is way down there at 6,500. So that number helps you. Now, the other thing you need to know is what's your conversion rate. In order to know your conversion rate, you have to know how many people called you, and you have to measure that. Now, you can measure it, yearly. You can measure it quarterly. You can measure it monthly. I prefer to measure it weekly, and I've talked about that before. But I want to see every week how many people called, how many people we converted, and I break it down further into the kind of cases that we got. So if I can tell you that this many cases, these were DUIs. These cases were, say, domestic violence. These cases were just run-of-the-mill, municipal or magistrate's court misdemeanors. This number of cases were what we consider felonies or major felonies. But you don't have to do that. You just need to know what your average case value is, because that's ultimately how it's going to mix in. So then once you know how many people contacted you and how many people hired you, then you just do the math. If 3 people contact you and 1 hires you, then your conversion rate's a third. It's at 33%. If 10 people contact you and 5 people hire you consistently, over the course of time, a long period of time, not just 1 week or not just some hot streak, but then if 10 people contact you and 5 people hire you, then your conversion rate's 50%. So once you do that simple math, you should be able to figure out how many leads you need in order to have $1 million law firm. And that's not that complicated. Okay. So how can you do this? And I was talking to somebody, that works with us at Prosper Law, and when I was asking him, about some of these numbers, because he's expanded recently and he wants to know, how to get, from point A to point B in his law firm. And he knows that he's spending more money on payroll and employee expenses, and he's a little nervous about, what's going on. So I ask him sometimes in these conversations that we have, just these basic numbers. And it still surprises me, when I'm talking to people that, are innovative enough, care enough, or in the know enough so that they say regularly listen to this podcast. They're seeking out information. They're going to things to learn and grow. That how far removed they are from having a law firm that's running like a business. And if you just do a little, self-check, and I ask you these questions, do you know what your gross revenue was last year? Do you know what your gross revenue was for the last quarter? Do you know how many cases that you signed up and converted? Do you know how many people hired you and didn't, or how many people contacted you and didn't hire you? So do you know how many leads you got per week or per month? Do you know how many cases you signed? Can you track your conversion rates, and are you tracking your revenue? Amazingly, and I was like this too, I really didn't know if I was making money or not. My books were just really kind of a mess because, we were taking in money and trying to pay the bills, and we just got this kind of general feeling that, okay, we're paying the bills. And I remember this older lawyer that had been around forever, and at one point he was talking about, he was at the time of ready to retire or whatever, and he was talking to me about maybe buying his law firm, and we were trying to assess it and evaluate it, and try to figure out, what, if anything, it was worth, and then what he could get for it, because he was not a young man, and he was still hustling really hard. And I remember when he showed me his books, I was kind of amazed because he was somebody that you just like, not that people didn't take him seriously. He was a great guy, but he seemed kind of like disorganized and disheveled and that sort of thing. And, but when I looked at his numbers, he had, I think one year he'd made about $400,000 gross. And he was mostly just criminal defense lawyer hustling out there doing all kinds of things. And then another year, I think the prior year, the year after that, his gross revenues on his tax return was about $600,000. Now, when I went to his office, because he was sharing these numbers with me, and I went to his office and I was looking at his office, and there were files everywhere. There were files on the ground. There were files stacked up in the corner. There were files on the desk. Some of the files were open. Some of the files were closed. He had a robust practice, and so the phone was ringing, and he was always, running off to meet with somebody or collect some money or go to court or something like that. And I remember him saying to me that, we pay the bills. I think his wife or something was concerned about, the profitability of this whole gigantic mess of, his law practice. But he said, we pay the bills. We're able to pay the bills. And he's able to pay the bills and keep some money. And I think that because the legal profession, because you're a lawyer and people know you and you have a license and people need you, there's a chance that you can just go out there and quote pay the bills and just have an unorganized, disorganized problem kind of practice. And I see that with a lot of people. Now I also see people who have solved a lot of problems. So the thing is that's going to cause you, to be able to move forward and to grow your law firm and then be able to bring in more paralegals, be able to bring in more qualified lawyers, be able to maybe expand your geography to another office, be able to do the things that you want to do so that you have an organized business, then you just have to know your numbers. And there's a saying, I think it's Peter Drucker, that says, what gets measured gets managed. And so if you don't know your average case value, if you don't know your conversion rate, if you don't know how many cases you're signing, if you don't know how many of the people that contact your law firm, how many people hire you, then you're just in the dark. And you really are not able to move forward. And I remember years ago, this lawyer who was kind of a friend of mine, really more of a friend of another friend, but I would spend time with him from time to time. And I remember, he was very confident in what he did. And he did a lot of family law stuff, and he did some criminal defense stuff. And I remember him telling me, because this was really before I knew anything, that he said, everybody that sits across the desk from me hires me, meaning that his got 100% close rate. And I think what he was trying to tell me was that, he was so good and so confident in what he could do for people that everybody that came in his office for an appointment and sat across the desk from him hired him. So he's telling me that he's got 100% close rate. And I don't know, what his revenues were like, and really my entire life until I started coaching people and having mentors and talking about business solutions, I never knew how much money anybody made. And for people that I don't work with personally, I can kind of figure it out. I can kind of look at the outside of the law firm and see, how it operates and see how many people work there. And I can do some internal calculations in my head and kind of figure out what they're making. I can kind of look at the outside of the car and know then what's under the hood and what's going on. But back then, I had no ability to do that. But usually speaking in terms of, say, 100% close rate. And so if you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, if say somebody comes in and they sit across the desk from me, they're hiring me. That's 100% close rate, which that means a couple of things. One, it means that you're delusional, okay, that you think that's true, but it's just not true, and you don't know because you're not measuring it. The other thing is that if you have a 100% close rate, that means that no one is contacting you except the people who have already made up their mind to hire you. And so in that situation, it really didn't matter what you said. They decided they were hiring you before they went there. Now, there's several issues with this now. Is that one is that, the chances of those people coming to your office and waiting a long time to have an appointment and sitting down and talking to you and not getting distracted and then hiring you like that, the times have changed a lot since then. And so if somebody refers you a client, if a client's referred to you, and they may have been referred by 2 or 3 people, and that's what we like to call a hard referral, your close rate on that is exceptionally high. And it's because you're really not closing it. You're really just trying not to screw it up. You're trying not to give them a good reason not to hire you, because then when they called you, they had already decided to buy. So if you do have a 100% close rate, you would benefit from some marketing, because that just means that there are a lot of people out there that you could help that aren't aware of you and aren't coming in. So look at your conversion rate, look at your number of cases signed, go back and start figuring out a system to create some of these numbers. Looking back, it took me a long time to come up with those systems. I was sitting in a room and somebody would tell me this, and I would say, oh, okay, I'll go do it. Then I'd go back and try to do it. And then it was really amazing how difficult it could be at times to get this simple math straight. But it's very important. What gets measured gets managed. And if you do that, then you'll start to improve your law firm. And that will improve your life, reduce your stress, allow you to have some sanity in the criminal defense world, which is extremely stressful. So I hope this is helpful. See you next time.
If you want to know more, go to prosperitelaw.com. We show criminal defense law firm owners how to reduce stress, have more free time, and make more money. Thanks for listening.